as a leader, as a CEO, as a owner of a company, a leader of a division. Funny question, not funny question. How important is communication? Rhetorical question, I think, in this context, right?
Well, to a mouse, it's this important.
Yeah.
It's massive.
Welcome to the Value Factory Podcast, brought to you by One Accord. We're all about helping businesses thrive and grow through leadership, strategy, and meaningful impact. Now, whether you're a seasoned executive or just starting out, our goal is to provide insights and inspiration to help you navigate your journey. Thanks for tuning in.
Welcome to the Value Factory. I'm so pleased to be here with Keith Ferrin. We're going to talk about some really important things that have to do with communication, organization, messaging with purpose. Keith says this way better than I do. And Keith has a really cool talent, skill, gift. He's going to tell us about that. Here we are. Welcome, Keith.
Thanks for having me, Nick. Good to be here.
Thanks for joining.
For sure.
We have talked just a bit. Well, we've talked about several things.
Right.
I want to save a little bit of that kind of awesome thing that you can do.
Okay.
But you just told me like your first big gig was at Microsoft, a big event. Can we start there?
Sure.
And then go back in time to when you were playing the guitar and leading worship in a church, and then how you ended up here.
Oh yeah, my very first like professional, I was hired to help somebody with a speech at Microsoft, was a guy that was a GM in one of the teams at Microsoft and happened to attend our church. And one time after church, and I had filled in and preached at the church that we were attending together, and he just said, "Hey, Keith, I was wondering, you get up on stage and you seem confident, and I remember what you're saying, and it doesn't appear to be that you're wetting your pants. So I've got this pretty important speech coming up that I really need to land. If I took you to breakfast, can I just talk you through it?" And I'm like, "Sure," which I come to find out later is I want to spend $15 on a plate of eggs instead of more than that on coaching.
Okay. Yeah.
So he and I sit down and then a few months, we talk through it. A few months goes by and I see him at church. And I'm like, "So how did that thing go in July that you had?"
Yeah.
And he's like, "Oh, well, it was unbelievable. It was, they got me up on stage with, there was a Formula One racing car behind me, and I was in a Formula One suit. And we're talking, I'm like, what was this?" And he goes, "Oh yeah, it was one of the keynotes at MGX, which is the Microsoft's largest internal conference." And so I said, he goes, "Yeah, I want you to work with me next year." I'm like, "You're paying me next year." And so that led to me spending many months leading up to the following July working with him and with his team on this next one. So the first one was just over eggs. The second one was much more involved, and which was kind of the first official one. And I ended up flying to Atlanta where it was with him. And it was one of those things where this is many years ago, and I'm standing backstage, and it's me and it's Rich, the guy that hired me, and there's the guy that he is about to hand off his business to as he gets promoted to another one. So the handoff, so that guy that was actually going to be taking his role as he got a promotion was in there, and then Chris Capicella had a part of that, who was one of the at one point was the senior VP of marketing or whatever that is. I mean, like the highest marketing guy. Yeah. And then Steve Ballmer walks in, who at the time is the CEO of the company. And he goes, "Hey, Chris, hey, Rich." He goes, "Who are you?" I'm the one guy. I'm like,
"Who are you?"
And so I'm the one who like walked Steve Ballmer to the back of the curtain to have him go out. And I'm like, this was my baptism by fire of the very first kind of corporate coaching thing was this keynote that all these guys were a part of. And that led to me working with a bunch of teams there. And with where we live here in the east side of Seattle, we're just surrounded by all these different companies. So the people that were, sitting at church with, the people that were on the sidelines of our kids' soccer matches with, another guy was led the director of sales from Amazon and had me come train an Amazon sales team. So it's just kind of I started off swimming in the deep end, let's just say.
But you didn't start there. You've got a lot of stage experience.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
But you didn't imagine yourself as a youth pastor, as a worship leader, coaching some of the most influential executives in technology companies in the world, really, Microsoft, Amazon, on how to communicate. That wasn't your career ambition.
No.
No. And then
I thought I was going to be a high school counselor and soccer coach.
Wow. Yeah.
That was the height that I thought I was going to get to.
Well, how about the first time you were on stage, standing at a podium or behind a microphone?
Yeah, that's a hard one to really identify, because I was actually speaking at events from the time I was really in college, because I got into college and there was a student run worship ministry that there were none of the staff. It was just the students put it together every Wednesday night at 9:30, and we would go. And so I told the guy who was running it my freshman year, I'm like, hey, I play guitar if you ever need somebody. He goes, bring your guitar next week. And the next week, all the way through 4 years, I was on that team, and then took over the lead of that. And so I was speaking a lot during that. And then right when I got out of college, I became a youth and worship pastor at this small church that had just started. There was a guy that was starting the church with a group of people, and I was the first person they hired outside of that. And so it was me, and it was a lead pastor, which meant if he was sick or he was on vacation, I was preaching and all that. So the guy that comes up to you at church and he says, you're comfortable on stage, you don't seem anxious. Yeah.
Is that, was that learned? Is that natural? You just feel comfortable in front of people?
Yeah, I would say that by the time he said that, it was something that it was a combination of those two. So I was one of those weird people who didn't mind from the time that I was 18 or 19. I didn't mind at all kind of giving the speech or being the person that delivered something. That was fine.
Attention,
but it was also something where I just loved the craft of it. I mean, I would just watch people tell a story or have an opening or use humor or the way they use body language or hand gestures or whatever. And I was just, so from very early on, from my early 20s, I was like a student of the craft, if you will.
Let's hang on to that one, because I think for a lot of folks, watching a performance is that craft. I mean, there are some exceptional preachers that can take some really dry Old Testament stuff, and you're like, wow, like I want to know more.
Right.
There's a craft to that. But before that craft, I think I'm curious about the question of just being the recipient of attention. There are a lot of people that I would believe even just giving a toast at a family birthday party in front of the people closest to them makes them uncomfortable. But that seems like step one for a lot of folks to then even start paying attention to the crowd. What do you think about that?
Yeah. And I definitely, that is the experience for so many people. And I think that it comes back to, or it led into what I do with my coaching, is that I actually think now of communication in 3 levels that are all built on each other.
Yeah.
The first is clarity, the second is confidence, and the third is creativity. because when people find out that I coach people in speaking, or that I'm a messaging coach and help them write books and blah, 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 when they find out that I'm in the arena of communication, then I would say 95+% of the first question I get will fall in either the second or the third. How do I not get nervous? Or how do I tell a good story? Or how to have a good opening? Or how do I get funnier or use humor? Or how do I have a better slide deck or whatever? It's either how do I not pee my pants, or how do I tell the story well? It's going to be in that. And I'm like, one of the mantras that I chant over and over again to my clients is clarity breeds confidence and unleashes creativity.
I wondered if there was something in that that is, as an observer of someone who's very talented, if I'm watching somebody very talented, I assume that they're just on a different level of comfort, but I know better. I know that there's actually something formulaic or even mechanical underlying that. That is, either it's a rote memorization, it's preparation, it's clarity of a message. It's certainly, there are people who have special gifts and God-given talent to communicate. Even those people, there's a discipline. There's a practice, that preparation.
There should be. Yeah, I would say there are a lot. I think there are a lot of people who are engaging storytellers, who are funny and keep you on the edge of your seat, and you enjoy hearing them, and then you leave and you liked it, but you weren't necessarily transformed by it.
Right.
And I think you can be, and I would say that is somebody who is more of a performer than a communicator.
Thank you. Yeah, you're getting to what I was.
A lot of what is labeled communication in corporate America today, and I would argue from a lot of pulpits today, is actually information dissemination, not communication, because there's not a purpose tied to it. They haven't decided what they want to accomplish, which comes from that clarity piece, that foundational piece for me is when you're talking about people that get nervous, which a vast majority of people that are asked to, whether it's doing a toast at their brother's wedding or whether it's speaking on a keynote in front of 10,000 people, most people are nervous. And I would argue that once you are crystal clear on your purpose, what you want to accomplish for the audience, then the preparation of it, the delivery of it, execution of it, all of that becomes a problem-solving exercise instead of a how do I get rid of my nerves? Yeah. And so for me, when somebody asks me, how do I not get nervous? I push pause on that little radio, and I say, let's first decide what you want to accomplish for your audience. Because once you've done that, then I find not all nerves go away, but a huge majority of the nervousness and the my hands, what am I do with my hands, and I'm playing with my hair all the time, or I'm always adjusting my butt, and then a lot of that goes away, and then you still might, like your left hand and then you can go, okay, let's work on that, because that's the one that's still there even when you're have a clear purpose. And so that is such a huge piece of it. Is once I tell people there will always be a purpose to any speech. You will either choose one or one will choose you. And a chosen purpose, an intentionally chosen purpose is almost always about your audience. Right. A subconscious, non-intentional purpose will almost always be about you.
Are you a story brand guy? You know,
I'm familiar.
Miller? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I'm a big fan of story brand and what Don Miller and his framework, his context is that it's in business and in marketing.
For sure.
Your customer is the hero of the story and you are the guide.
Yep. For sure.
and so many, me,
Mm-hmm.
you know, when someone says, well, what do you do? I always ask this question today, and I've answered the question a gazillion times about what we do at One Accord. We've got marketing approved. At One Accord, we lead organizations through transition and growth to maximize value. I have said that 1,000 times. Today I'm asked, and I'm like, I just completely do a blank. And then I defaulted into kind of the operations of what we do. And I lost sight just in that moment of the audience, the person that I was talking to, and my intention of my communication being about them.
Yeah.
So I'm hearing you in this moment that in a default, we put ourselves in that hero position.
Yeah.
And so if I'm taking away from this conversation, the preparation for communication is getting centered around intentionality. Who am I talking to? Why am I sharing this information? What do I want them? Like, we're answering those questions.
Oh yeah.
And a person could even just journal that out before even thinking about what they're going to say or where they're going to stand or what's in their PowerPoint deck. Or
please do it first.
Okay.
Oh yeah, that's I mean, the system that I teach,
the
complete communication system, is the system that I teach, and the first step is purpose. I don't want to move on to precision and your points and your process. I don't want to move on to any of that until you're crystal clear on your purpose, because purpose drives everything else. And so we need to shift. I don't care whether you're running a meeting or you're doing a sales call or you're writing a book or a blog post. I don't care what the communication model is.
Yeah.
You need to decide ahead of time what you want to accomplish instead of what you want to talk about. Because almost always people will say, oh, today I want to talk about, I've said to many, many people, including a couple CEOs, which was a mistake. I've said, nobody cares what you want to talk about.
Yeah.
They care what you want to accomplish.
Interesting.
If I say, hey, today we're going to talk about public speaking. I'm like, oh, okay. If I say, okay, today I'm going to show you how to connect with an audience in ways that you didn't even imagine possible.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they know in a realm of the topic of public speaking,
yeah,
this particular talk is about connecting with an audience. Different than how to use intentional gesturing or vocal control or mapping it out, or how to minimize your notes when they can't be memorized, or whatever. I mean, there are so many purposes within the topic of public speaking, but so often people will say, oh, today I want to talk about public speaking. And no one cares.
As a leader, as a CEO, as a owner of a company, a leader of a division. Funny question, not funny question. How important is communication? The rhetorical question, I think, in this context, right?
Well, to a mouse, it's this important.
Yeah.
It's massive.
And how, I'm just, I'm processing through this, right? How often do I communicate? How do I communicate? The few opportunities that I have to communicate verbally in person, particularly today, so much of it's video, might be verbal, but it's video, then in person. Those, they're very narrow opportunities, really. If I count up 1,440 minutes in a day, I might only have 30 minutes with a person or 60 minutes with an audience. And I definitely have a desire, but I can't say regularly that I'm clear about my purpose going into these. And when I say that, I mean, probably 1 out of 100 times am I that thoughtful about a purpose.
Hopefully that'll change after today.
I think
it's honestly one of those things where if I can just get my clients or somebody I'm sitting next to on an airplane to just start thinking about, okay, for 60 seconds before I type this email, let me think about what I want the outcome of this email. What is the response that I want? Not what do I want to talk about, what do I want to tell them about, what information am I going to give them,
right?
But why am I giving it? so much, again, of what is labeled communication is information dissemination, because our main question is what, not why. And we need to shift that whole narrative when we go into a meeting.
Yeah.
What's the purpose of the meeting? Not what's the topic of the meeting.
Mm-hmm.
What's the purpose of the meeting? Well, we're going to brainstorm ideas for this, or we're going to announce the Q3 marketing plan.
Why does this feel like it's new information to me right now, Keith? Where have I been? I mean, I'm thinking of the last bits of information dissemination that I've engaged in, like quite literally. Like, I don't mind. I actually enjoy being really candid and open in these conversations about all of the ways that I can get better as an owner of a company, as a CEO. 2 or 3 emails that I've sent this week to my whole team, and I try to keep those very limited, but there is information that everybody needs to know. I think to myself, ooh, this is really cool. I like it. I need to tell all of them. That's not the purpose.
Don't do that.
Don't do that. Don't do that.
No.
Right?
Unless it's a really good joke or something like that.
Yeah.
And go ahead and do that.
Yeah.
Everybody needs that.
Now we've adopted some systems internally where many of those things I basically put them on a parking lot, like the whiteboard parking lot when you're in a meeting. Like, we'll talk about that later. The 4-hour regularly scheduled kind of, I do an update to the whole team twice a month.
Okay.
And now I'm thinking, well, what is my purpose of that? You got me really thinking. Okay. But I just own the fact that I disseminate information regularly because I think it's cool. And if I think it's cool, doesn't everybody think it's cool?
Right.
Not really.
Probably not.
Yeah.
But I would get, I mean, my pushback to that would actually be, you thought that it was cool because it hit some kind of want or need for you.
Yeah.
And they're getting that, they're receiving that email, having no idea what the need or want was, that why you found it interesting, and why sometimes the email itself can be identical with a sentence at the beginning that says, hey, based on the conversation that we had last Thursday about ABC, I thought that the third paragraph in this article would really tie into what we were saying. That's just the context that says, that gives purpose to it. So I think one of the not only biggest mistakes from a communication standpoint, but I think one of the really
we were talking context of emails and the purpose of disseminating information. And
one of the big mistakes that I see get made all the time is the forwarding of a long email with just FYI in the body of the email. And it happens all the time. But what I try, we're kind of getting into the granular a little bit of specific to email. But what I constantly try to get people to remember is, when somebody receives the email, the first time that it pops into their inbox and they see that email, they weren't just thinking about you. They weren't just thinking about whatever it is that email's about. And so it's, one of my mantras is speaking is serving. And I would say the same thing with sending email is serving. And if the mindset is, how can I serve this audience, which in this case is the recipient, I'm sending an email to Nick. Well, if I just say, hey, FYI, then I'm requiring you to read enough of the email to ascertain why it is that I've sent you the email.
Right.
Well, that's not serving. That's that's demanding. Whereas if I take the time to write 2 or 3 sentences and just say, hey, based on our last conversation, I thought this would really be helpful. I'm including the whole article in case it's of interest to you, but the part that I thought would be really helpful for you would be the 3rd and 4th paragraphs, because it pertains to what we were talking through.
Man.
Well, they all of a sudden, they can read the whole article if they've got the time to, or they want the context themselves, or it's interesting. Great. But they can also look at those 2 paragraphs, and which I would go so far as to say, go ahead and use the little highlighter feature to highlight those paragraphs, or whatever it is. And so I
wonder, do you think that that there's a present day, like there's a generational element to this. And as I hear you talking about just putting the little bit of extra effort ahead of time, serving to frame or contextualize something that's being sent, my immediate thought was, boy, I should talk to my kids about that. And then I thought, yeah, but I do it too. Yeah. Like, it's not just the kids these days.
No,
it's really pervasive.
And it may sound counter, but I actually think that it's worse with those of us that are older.
Interesting.
And I know that I'm older than you, but whatever. And but the reason is because our kids have grown up in an environment that is a soundbite culture. They think in terms of the quick text. They even abbreviate 4-letter words, YOUR to UR, because we don't have time, you know. And it's one of those things where they're so used to being concise and yes and this, and that you know exactly what you know, why they're sending this little piece. They're not getting verbose even when we want them to. What?
You think they're better communicators?
I think sometimes in email and texting they can be, because I think the other thing is that you and I remember a time when there wasn't email,
right? And
we also remember a time when email was a primary means of when it first became a primary means of communication.
Yeah.
But you weren't getting hundreds a day.
Right.
So you could read the 5 emails you got that day and it didn't take your whole day. Well, so if it was a little bit longer, it didn't matter. Plus, even when emails became more frequent, it's only been in the last 8 to 10 years or so that the first experience of an email, the first encounter someone has with an email, moved from being on a laptop with Outlook wide open to being on a phone, which means your first encounter is now a couple sentences instead of a couple paragraphs. And so it used to be, you know, and all the etiquette of that all changed because the whole above the fold concept, right? You know what I mean by that?
Above the fold.
Above the fold, it refers to the old newspaper of what's on top. Makes people want to open the newspaper. Well, it used to be when I first started coaching people 20 years ago, I would talk to people about having their email. But most people are experiencing their email. They've got their Outlook and it's full screen and they are diving into email. And you need to make sure that what is in that window captures their attention and makes a connection personally and all that kind of stuff. Well, now I'm like, their first interaction with an email to decide whether it's worth reading or not is on a screen that is this big, and so they're having to decide. And I have a lot of these little mantras. One of them is, if the recipient of your email has to scroll to figure out why they should scroll, they won't scroll.
Oh, that's
it'll it'll go into the to be read later folder, also known as delete after 30 days. And so it's one of those things where kind of the opening sentence or two that talks about your weekend and makes personal connection and all that.
Now listen, email marketers know this better than anybody. Yeah. And they've got data and they'll track. And I'm thinking of my own email experience. I get way too many of them. Yeah. And there are emails that come to me from people that I know I've already judged, not even discerned. I've judged, right? Like I know. That this is not going to be urgent or important, but I'm making the decision not on the 2 sentences of the email on the phone, but rather in the inbox, the title of the email and the beginning 9 words that's in that little sliver. That's where I decide whether or not I'm going to open to read. And then if I open and it's more than 3 sentences, it is almost always I've got to do that later. There's so much demand for attention. Very interesting. Yeah. Let's pause again. I recorded. So on this, if we shift a little bit to the corporate presentation, but actually, and then I want to go to the thing that you do that is really cool. Okay. I mean, you do a lot of stuff that's really cool, but the headliner thing. Okay,
Right.
so last week we hosted what I call Discovery Day. So every quarter I bring in folks that are interested to work with us, and it's kind of a recruiting event. And I had a camera set up in the back, and our team presents in 30-minute chunks on kind of their practice areas and what they do. So I recorded it this time, so that we could watch ourselves back and then critique and learn from on this. I just looked at the recording the other day and it was out of focus. I'm like, oh man. Now, for internal purpose, doesn't matter. Everything's a little fuzzy, but setting up cameras and all of that, someday it'd be really awesome to have a film crew.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I want to ask you or let you tell the story of how it is that you have been able to recite not the entire, but many books of the Bible.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it was I can honestly point back to the day when it something clicked for me, because I was one of those kids raised in the church and went to youth group when I got into high school and summer camp. And then, as I mentioned earlier, was a part of a worship ministry at college, and then was a youth pastor. And it was during that season, I was a youth pastor from 91 to 97. And it was April 18th of 93 that a friend of mine who was a youth pastor at another church, a bigger church in town in Tacoma where we were, he and I were having lunch, and he just goes, dude, I don't know what to make of this. There's this guy coming to our church Sunday night who has memorized the entire Gospel of Luke. And he gets up on stage by himself, no sets, no props, no costumes, no other actors and actresses, for 2 hours. And he quotes the Bible. And I'm just like, first of all, that's a lot. And second, I was like, are people really going to listen to that? Because my mind goes back to being the frightened 8-year-old kid standing up in front of big church being asked to quote John 3:16, and I just get through it as fast as I can, and then I sit down and so I went, quite honestly, to support my buddy who was on staff at the church and to see if somebody could do it. I had never heard of anything like that. I didn't grow up with any of the Bible memory ministries like Awana or Bible quizzing, so I didn't know anything about. I had learned my Bible verse to get a piece of candy in Sunday school or something like that. So I just never even had heard of anything like that. And I tell people that it was April 18th of 93 that the living word of God went from being a phrase to a reality. I just saw it come alive, and I was like, oh my goodness, that was insane. The guy's name is Bruce Kuhn. He had been in the Broadway cast of Les Mis, but he was a Christian guy who was hired to do Luke off Broadway, and did that for 12 weeks. And then he just went, man, he's watching how audiences are responding to this. And so he went on staff with a ministry called InterVarsity Christian Fellowship, college ministry. And he just spent years traveling around the country, just presenting Luke. And then he learned the book of Acts. But I went up to Bruce after his presentation, and I just said, hey, they said you were going to be in the Seattle area from New York for the whole week. Can I take you to lunch tomorrow? They didn't say anything about a performance you have tomorrow. And he said, sure. So I picked him up at noon, and we ended up spending the whole day together. I dropped him back off at his hotel at 9 p.m.
Wow.
And we spent the whole entire day together. And he just started talking about the Bible very differently. He started saying some things like, well, what if instead of memorizing this verse and studying this little piece and this little piece and this little piece and this one parable and this, he said, what if you just took a book of the Bible and you just soaked in it until you knew it? You just hung out there, and then when you know it, you move on. And I'm thinking, okay, I've heard about studying the Bible and memorizing verses. I've never heard anybody talk about soaking in it and hanging out with it.
Yeah.
And so that summer of 93, I just took the book of Philippians, which takes about 15 minutes to read, 15, 16, 17 minutes to read. And I just said, I'm just going to read this every day for a summer and just see what happens. And over the course of that summer, I was more consistent than I'd ever been with my Bible reading. I actually understood it better. I enjoyed it more, and I remembered it better. I got to the end of the summer and was driving down the street and was just kind of talking through Philippians in my head, and realized I had just gone about 3 paragraphs without making a mistake. And I went, memorizing scripture without trying. That's kind of cool. Yeah. But I realized that I hadn't just memorized it. I had internalized it. It was a part of it. I mean, I understood it and I knew it word for word.
Yeah.
I think that so often the focus is getting the words in the right order.
Yeah.
And for me, I want to know the word, not just the words. And
Yeah.
and so that was that led to me just soaking in it and thinking through it and just being like lit up and I got to the end of that year, and that had been kind of such a transformative 6 months from the beginning of that summer through the fall. I just said, I want to know the life of Jesus like this. And so I just picked the Gospel of John, and I just said, for as long as it takes, I'm just going to read the Gospel of John over and over again until I know it. And it took about a year where I was just reading it. And, the Gospel of John's about 2 hours, a little less than 2 hours to read. So most days I'd read 30 or 40 minutes or something like that. And then when I get to the end, I'd flip back 25, 30 pages and I'd start over. So for a year,
so most days you would read the same book of John for 30 or 40 minutes until you get to the end, and then repeat for a year. Yeah.
Yeah. Because it's different. It wasn't like the other books that I was reading. It wasn't like a nonfiction book or even a fiction book where I'm just either wanting to be entertained or wanting to learn something or whatever. It's one of those things where I realized through the time in Philippians that my time in the Bible was primarily relational time, not informational time. I was hanging out. And so I was just noticing different things. And when you repeat it, it's kind of like a movie that you love, you can watch it again. I mean, think about the movies that you've seen 10 times, 15 times, people that, and you all of a sudden realize that you're talking along with the movie because you've seen it, not because you tried to memorize the lines. You just know it. You know the story as well as you know the lines. Yeah. And so I started, I can actually point to 2 events that may help me make the shift from, okay, I'm a youth and worship pastor at this little church, to now I'm doing with the Gospel of John what Bruce did with the Gospel of Luke. And it was the following spring, so it was April of 94. So I'd already internalized Philippians, never shared it with anybody, because unlike Bruce, my background was not drama. I had never, ever been in a school play. I had never done anything. In fact, I quit Cub Scouts before I got to Boy Scouts. And I came home and I told my mom, I can't continue with this. And she said, why? I said, because you have to memorize stuff and quote it in front of people.
Oh, isn't that funny? Yeah.
So back when I was 8, God laughed at that. And so it was one of those things where it never even dawned on me to share it publicly with somebody. So Philippians was completely just for me. John I thought it was going to be just for me. But I had read through John. By the time I saw him again that next April or May, I had probably read through the Gospel of John, 10 or 20 times. And now I was to the point where I was looking at, like, hunkering down on one story at a time. And because in the Gospel of John, it's 21 chapters, but there are probably 40-ish like events recorded. Okay. And so I would so now I kind of had watched the movie. So now I was studying the scenes, if you will. Yeah. And so it was one of those things where I was probably to the place where I knew John by April, May, but not word for, and I probably had 4 chapters that I really, really knew. And so Bruce came back into town and we got together and we were getting ready to go to lunch, and I picked him up at the place where he was rehearsing, and I said, hey, guess what I'm doing? He said, what? I said, I'm learning the Gospel of John. He said, really? I said, yeah. He said, well, do a couple chapters for me. Yeah. And I went, what? I was never shared with anybody. And so I did the first couple chapters of John, and he just said, I think you could do this. Huh. And I'm like, do what? He goes, I think you could do with John what I do with Luke. I'm like, oh, great. So, put that on the back burner for a long time. And then, so kind of he knew what it takes, because he's said one-man theater, which is essentially what one-man storytelling. He said that's a different beast than just being an actor on stage. It's a different set of skills. And he said there are some really, really good actors who wouldn't be on stage, and there's some really, really good storytellers who shouldn't act with other people. It's just for, he said, I think you could do it. And so, but the other that was even almost more impactful for me was a couple months after that, I was preaching at my own church. So there, 80 people or something in the room, and most of them are my youth group kids. And I was preaching on John 9, which is the whole story of the blind man healed with spit, mud, and all that. Jesus puts mud on his eyes. And because I now knew it, rather than reading the scripture and then preaching, I just told that one story from memory. I just told the story, and then I preached. Got done with the sermon. Everyone's chatting after church. I'm talking to people, and one of my gals, a girl named Nicole, who's a senior in high school, 17-year-old girl, comes up to me and she goes, "Keith, I hope that someday when I read my Bible, it sounds to me the way it sounds to you."
Wow.
And I just, it was one of those things where at the time it was like, "Oh, that's really nice, Nicole. Thank you. I hope so too." And then I'm driving home and the Holy Spirit's just slapping me around.
Right.
Like, are you paying attention?
Yeah.
There's a 17-year-old girl who wants to read her Bible differently.
Wow.
And so for me, the storytelling, because now internalizing scripture was just woven into how I study. If I'm studying a book of the Bible, I'm internalizing it. And so that just kind of continued on. But it was March 3rd of 96 was the first time that I got up on the stage of a church and presented the Gospel of John. And so it's been a little bit more than 29 years that I've been doing this. But for me, the storytelling was always an entry point into a conversation about how do we read and study our Bibles differently than just kind of this academic study this little piece, figure out what it means, and then move on to the next piece. And that just doesn't have a relational feel to it. So, but so that's what I was doing. And then that led to me speaking, kind of leaving my full-time church ministry I was being asked to speak at more conferences and other churches and Christian universities and schools and that kind of thing. And then ended up being, I think I mentioned to you that we had moved. My wife is from Kirkland up here where we're sitting right now. And so once I was no longer on staff at the church, we wanted to be up near her family. And my mom lives in Bellevue. So we moved up here and started attending a church that a friend of mine had started. And I was sitting with Randy at lunch, and he just said, "Keith, you're comfortable on stage and you're a fairly good storyteller and you're mildly funny. So you could probably wing it and have a pretty decent speaking career. But if you ever want to be excellent, you need to go to this conference." And he challenged me to go to this intensive public speaking training conference that at the time was called the Dynamic Communicators Workshop. Now it's called the SCORE Conference. And mountains of Colorado, you go, and 3 nights in a row, you deliver a 5-minute speech. You get trained during the day, then 4 nights in a row, you deliver a 5-minute speech. Really? It's recorded. You've got eight people in the room, 8 students and 1 professional coach, and they critique you right on the spot, and they record that as well, so you can relive that joy all the time. Okay. And it's just this intensive deal. But in addition to body language and voice and all that kind of content, they had a system for thinking through a speech. And so I don't know what made this one different, but so many conferences or half-day trainings or different things that you go to, it's really good and it's really good content, and then it becomes a really nice folder on your shelf. And you're like, if I ever put that into practice, that would be helpful. Right. And it was one of those things. I was on the plane coming home from Colorado, and I just said, okay, I don't want to lose. There's something unique that happened there, and I don't want to lose that. So for the next year, I committed a year. I said, for the next year, I'm not going to get up on a stage that I don't put my content through their system before I get up and deliver it. Okay. And so I just put it into practice for a year. And over the course of that year, a few different results came about. One is, while I was already comfortable on stage, that comfort turned to confidence. I also found that I was being more effective. Like I would run into people a month or 2 months or 3 months later, and they would tell me, "Oh, when you said this and this and this and this made a difference in this part of my life." And so people were remembering it. So I was more confident, and I was having greater impact. And I was realizing that the more comfortable I got with the system, the less time it would actually take me to prepare. So I was actually spending less time preparing presentations that went better and had greater impact, and I was having more fun doing it.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay,
There's
so there's something to it. And so and then it was 2 to 3 years after that that my conversation with Rich that turned into working with Microsoft and everything. But so
how much time do you spend? Is it proportionate to the amount of time? Like if you're going to do a 30-minute keynote, do you spend 90 minutes because it's 3 times? Like, is there a relationship there?
No, not for me.
Okay.
No, I find that it changes. It changes so much. Some of it is what I'm being asked to talk on, something I've delivered before. Is it something that has a lot of detailed research that needs to be done because there's some stats that I need to include in there? Is it brand new content? Is it so there are a lot of different factors that come into play as far as how long it takes. If I connect, where we're at now to where we started the conversation or around where we started the conversation, in my own delivery of, if I am asked to speak, I'm a member of a executives organization, right? Other CEOs and leaders in companies. And we are invited to talk for 15 minutes about our companies. And so that's a thing where I am disseminating information and want to be communicating, taking that away. Good. And I want to now be thinking about my purpose. What is it that I want the audience to know or experience or feel? And you probably have other framework for that purpose. But I've always prepped in, just saying the words, and I'll do it 2 or 3 times. Like I would never, that's a big statement. I would prefer not to just go on stage and deliver an important message without having first said the words out loud to my computer screen alone in a room. Just practice saying the words. But that's practicing the performance. That's how I'm defining it right now, without thinking about that purpose and being intentional ahead of time. Even I shared with you, we have this recruiting event, and my team and I will present on what we do. We've done it 5 times as of the first quarter in January 25. This is the first time that we met collectively and asked that question: what is the purpose of the day? The first 4 times I had just I didn't wing it, but I wasn't thoughtful about it. We didn't even go through a real intentional process. We just kind of asked the question as we were putting together our slides. We're getting there. So my question was, how much prep time? You say it kind of depends. Yeah, it really depends. I think that while the time changes, I would say my process stays fairly similar. Like I think a lot of people do their planning in PowerPoint. They're just starting to put together their slides and what they want to do. And in my opinion, that's a massive, massive mistake. Because then, it is. I mean, that's what I do. Yeah, start preparing in. If you want to be on your computer, then in Word or OneNote or whatever, and get that purpose and that content and the analogies you want to use and potentially some imagery or whatever. Get that collected so that the PowerPoint becomes an enhancement to you as the communicator, and helps your audience connect with what you're saying. So you're only then moving from your notes what is going to be helpful for your audience to see because my background is actually in psychology. My master's is in counseling. I've always been fascinated with the brain and how the brain works and stuff. Well, when it comes to, if you've started preparing in PowerPoint, you have to actually have a fight with your brain to take something off, because you have to decide that wasn't as important. Yeah. And at one point you had determined that it was because you put it on there. Whereas if you have this collection of content and you say, what's the best piece to put on the slide? So your slides will automatically have less clutter. so often people are changing the font size so they can fit more on.
Yeah.
And I'm like, my mantra when it comes to slides is never give your audience permission to read instead of listen, which is what we do all the time. We just put tons of words up there. And so we click the slide, they look over, they read it. They've already determined what they think you're going to say. And you're now recapturing attention, which is, the death sentence of a speaker. If you're just constantly recapturing attention instead of holding their attention. And so that slide, as simple as you can make it, the better. And so it's a lot easier to make a simple slide if all of your notes and ideas and statistics and all that are on a Word document or a OneNote or something like that, or even a notepad. And then you just put what's going to really help you communicate that. Yeah. And so, because we get lost in our content. And when it comes to purpose and content, I've heard, and you've probably heard this from as somebody who creates content, from the time I started writing or blogging and creating any content at all, I've heard that phrase, content is king. You got to have good content. Content is king. And I say all the time, content is not king. Purpose is king. Content is the peasant that serves the king.
Wow.
And that whole idea of once you know what your purpose is, once you know what you want to accomplish, not what you want to talk about, what you want your audience to think, feel, or do, not what you want them to know.
Yeah.
Then all of your content can serve that purpose.
Yeah.
And so is there stuff they need to know? Sure. But why? If you answer the why, that leads you to your purpose. Well, they need to know this so that they can do this, so that they can be ready to do this, so that, and so I frequently tell my clients, I'm going to give you the easiest 2 words to memorize that's going to transform your communication. So that, that's it. Anytime that you are brainstorming, okay, what's the purpose of this meeting? What's the purpose of this email? And you find yourself saying the word, I want them to know, they need to know this, or I need to update them on this, or they need to understand this. Anytime you hear yourself using know, update, inform, those 3 words specifically, know, update, and inform, go ahead and write that down, because that's probably going to be some of your content.
Yeah.
So go ahead and write it down, but just don't put a period there.
Yeah.
Put so that ... and finish the sentence, because they need to know this so that they can do this. They need to be updated on the status of this project so that we can overcome these 3 challenges we keep running into, or so that we can serve these 5 clients who are on the fence of whether they're going to leave us or not. Or, right, there's a so that the information will lead to. And so
if there is anybody watching, there's 2 things that came out of this conversation, 3 things, but the purpose is king, content
is the peasant
that serves the king, and those 2 words, so that. It's super important. I could keep talking with you, asking you more questions. Maybe we'll have to have another conversation and follow.
Happy to.
Appreciate you sharing your story and your wisdom. How does somebody, here's what I've heard about you is that if I Google you, I'll find 4 pages of Keith Ferrin
Bible stuff. Yeah.
Right. But that's not the core of what you do vocationally. Is that right?
No, it is. I mean, I probably spend 80% of my time doing the Bible stuff.
Is it really?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
And I spend about 20% of my time. And it's one of those things where, the reason that you're not going to find by Googling me, find my corporate stuff is because in 20 years of coaching, I've never advertised anything, because it's something that the ministry piece is something I'm passionate about both.
Yeah.
But the ministry piece is so much my DNA of what I do that it's one of those things where I only take on a handful of clients at a time. And so it's just been clients that recommend clients that recommend clients. And so you can certainly find me if you go to my corporate company is called Simply Communicate. And if you go to isimplycommunicate.com, There is another, I think, British company that also has simplycommunicate.com. So don't go there. But I don't know what they do. They don't do messaging coaching, but simplycommunicate.com.
Yeah.
But if you just search my name, you can find me on YouTube. All the YouTube stuff that you'll find are by ministry. You can find me at keithferrin.com as well, but it'll be on the ministry side, but you can still use that same contact page if you forget the Simply Communicate. But
Awesome.
But yeah. But so it's fun. I spend probably 20-25% of my time working with corporate clients, C-level leaders, teams, sales teams, whatever, coaching them on messaging and communication. I spend about 75 to 80% of my time speaking at faith-based nonprofit events and raising money for nonprofits and speaking at conferences and churches and universities, wherever they'll have a stage. Because It's not Cub Scouts anymore. Yeah. So I actually like it now.
Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah. Keith, thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Appreciate it, man.
It's been a joy.
All right.